Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will deliver the 2026 budget speech tomorrow. That's Wednesday in Parliament, well, at the City Hall. Godongwana will set out the government's fiscal policy and economic agenda for the year ahead, including any potential tax changes. Last year, proposed VAT changes set off an impasse with the DA that threatened the GNU. Market commentators are hoping to see an improvement in South Africa's finances. To discuss what we can expect from the upcoming national budget speech, we are joined by Senior Research Fellow at the Trade Collective, Dr. Lebohang Pheko. Dr. Pheko, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, and welcome again to Morning Live.
Thank you, Leanne, and to you and the viewers.
I mean, we cannot forget what happened last year. That word VAT and the standoff for the GNU and that calling off of the budget at the last minute. I mean, it was a crazy year last year. Let's perhaps maybe jog our memories about where we were at this time last year.
I mean, this time last year, it seemed as though we were not able to even determine whose responsibility it was to pass the budget. It also seemed as though at the time the GNU was definitely not particularly coherent, and it was looking more as though the wheels were coming off. It also made us think a bit more clearly about whose function it is to pass a budget, what is the role of a budget vote, and who within a parliamentary majority, but really a voter minority, which is the ANC at the time, even to this date, whose responsibility it was to actually ensure that the budget was passed. So I think that, the constitutional scholars and the financial and budget scholars may have enjoyed that work, but we're hoping for something a bit calmer this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope for that. But when we talk about something calmer, what are we hoping to see from this budget? Do we want a stabilization budget or a growth budget?
So, I mean, Leanne, we have a few challenges. The one is that we're standing at the intersection of a very narrow but high-yielding income base. The second is that we also have a lot of broad-based indirect taxation. So we all pay taxes in different ways, and I think it's really important at this time of year to get away from the narrative that a few people are paying tax. We all pay taxes every time. There are food levies, there are petrol levies, and so on. There are bread and milk levies. And we're also dealing with a situation where there's deep structural inequality. There's been very weak growth intergenerationally, and also political limits on returns. So the real issue is not so much tax burden sharing, but it's also thinking around what the fiscal drag means and the ways in which that this quietly raises the burden. And as you rightly say, after last year's VAT backlash, I don't think we should expect any headline-grabbing tax increases, but we should probably expect some limited inflation adjustments as well to tax brackets, which might increase the different tax rates. We should also think about access. We expect access and fuel levies, which to rise, because that's like a safe space to play. The sin taxes are not so popular, but they also don't face as much backlash. And I think that thirdly, that revenue will probably be lifted through subtle measures rather than really bold reforms. But I think that the political constraint has certainly replaced really strong policy ambition.
Yeah, and that's very, very important, because if we had to look at it, I mean, if you were in the finance ministry and speaking to the finance minister right now, what would you think is the biggest risk facing our economy right now?
I think the destabilization claims. I mean, I think we still have very modest growth. We have to really think around the necessity of narrowing deficits and stabilizing debt to GDP, Leanne, particularly because the more that we borrow without any tangible manifestation of where this borrowing is going to, why are there still potholes? Why don't we have water? These are some of the things that a lot of people are very concerned about. And I think the other thing is that we should expect emphasis on primary surpluses as well, because that sustainability has the potential to really stabilize our economy, but it also it depends largely on improved economic performance. And I think that our economic performance as a country has intergenerationally been mixed, to say the least, but that's also because I have always been of the view that some of our fundamentals are quite are quite misaligned. So there's the trickle-down theory, the foreign direct investment, the outward-looking emphasis on our economic modeling and in our trade architecture, and not dealing with the fundamentals such as basic public service delivery, basic services, and so on. These are the things that galvanize an economy in, a healthy nation, an educated nation, and so forth. And those are the kind of the fundamentals that we haven't been able to get our head around.
You mentioned the debt issue because I want to get an idea in terms of how serious our debt is, because, where are we servicing costs right now, and are they crowding out essential services by trying to sort out these debts that we find ourselves in?
I mean, I think that we have to think around what we owe as South Africa. We owe local investors, majoritarily. That's in pension funds, that's in insurance companies. That also includes banks, asset managers. We also owe, foreign investors. It's a minority, but it's significantly, and these things tend to add up. So those would be global investment funds and bondholders as well. So a large portion of our debt is actually owed to South Africans through retirement funds and through financial institutions. And I mean, what the problem with this is that, well, a good thing is that it's mainly rand denominated, which reduces currency risk because it means that, of course, we're not going to be subject to the vagaries of currency fluctuations. But it does also mean that, when we think around things like retail savings bonds, treasury bills, government bonds, and the things where this money needs to go to, it needs to go to, for example, our budget deficits, Leah. It does need to go to our infrastructure. It should be going to our social wage, so-called social grants, and it should also be going to public sector wages as well. The SOE the SOE has been a historical contributor to this debt and a very controversial contributor to this debt as well. And I think in today's climate, we certainly need to be thinking differently around the way that SOEs are even configured, given some of the controversies around SOEs over the past few years.
Yeah, and that's a big one. And I know we'll continue to talk about this for the rest of the day, and of course tomorrow in the head up to it. But just to close off the conversation on the issue of debt in South Africa, should South Africa adopt a formal debt rule? Because I know that the IMF have suggested that. Do you think that's the right way to go?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that what we should really be thinking about, if we think around foreign dependency and debt dependency, is how we can manage what we can manage. So things around rising interest costs, things around how to open up our very limited fiscal space. My concern with things like that is that they also are often linked with international prescripts, and some of these prescripts are linked to things like that are beyond our control, like commodities prices, like gold prices, like tariff tantrums, for example. So I do think that we should be much more clear around our own sovereignty and our own national policy of sovereign space and deal with the things that we can deal with. We should potentially, of course, think around not having, the kind of huge amounts of that. I mean, a debt to GDP of about 83% or something like that. We should certainly think around reducing that so that in future we will be able to function with much more fiscal space. But it's a trade-off, isn't it? Because it will always be that there will be something that is needed in the economy. And of course, on a controversial final note, let's bear in mind that all of these commissions that we also are fond of having at the moment also cost quite a bit of money, and perhaps we can shave around there as well.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money. And South Africans know this, and it's a lot of money sometimes to never see the outcomes being what's the word I'm looking for? Realized, and that's a very big problem. If we get back to looking at the budget, it's not that we haven't been given a little bit of a teaser, because the midterm budget policy statement last year that the minister gave us, basically, are there going to be changes both on the expenditure side as well as the revenue side of this year's budget? I mean, that's something that he was hinting towards.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that what we saw last year, which was developed, was that it basically just gave us a sense of what the GDP growth projections would be. It gave us a sense of what the revenue collections to date had been, and also some of the deficit estimates. Yeah, and I think that what we can expect is probably some updated plans for the SOEs that I've mentioned. I think we should also expect something that links to the borrowing plans. I mean, to your point around debt and to what we've been speaking about around international debt. We should also probably expect some noises around some, how they're going to boost investor confidence, which frankly for me are the least, not a particularly compelling stakeholder, but an important one because that is how our economy functions. And I also think that he's probably going to hark back to whether or not the fiscal targets that were set last year are actually holding. And that's really the crux of the matter. Also bearing in mind, of course, that, there are going to be big changes at SARS with the leadership of SARS and what that looks like at the moment. We are one of the most vigorous tax collection regimes in the world. Again, and most South Africans are aware of that, comparable to New Zealand, Japan, the Netherlands, and so forth, and other so-called high, middle income, high to middle income countries. I don't know whether, in a country of such inequality, we can be classified appropriately as such. But be that as it may, the question will remain, where does it actually go? Because, if anybody has been to Japan or New Zealand and then comes to South Africa, if certain parts of South Africa are absolutely, look entirely different to rural and peri-urban areas. And I think that kind of social redistributive outcomes of where does the money go are something that I think, harking back to what was said in November last year, South Africans will want to understand where the infrastructural expenditure is going to be directed.
Absolutely. I love that you touched on that point. I also want to very quickly, I don't even know if we've got time to touch on two more issues, but definitely this one, the public sector wage bill, always one of the contentious issues. I mean, it absorbs what, 1/3 of the total expenditure of the budget. Does this need to be moderated in order to stick to our fiscal consolidation plans?
I mean, I think that we talk about the public sector wage bill in South Africa as though that it's an abstraction. This amounts to about 1/3 of total consolidated government spending, and it does absorb a significant share of tax revenue. But this is how the country is run, Leanne. These are our teachers, these are our public sector nurses, public sector doctors, police officers, cool drinks and all, our soldiers and so on and so forth, the guys who work at SARS, the people who work in post offices, the few that are left, and so on. So I do think that we should be very careful of this very outward-looking, very Martha orthodox view of public expenditure. And I think that it's not so much what is being spent, it is how it is being spent and the value, the return on investment in that regard. I mean, I also think that cutting the wage bill, there are risks to that. It means fewer teachers, fewer police, fewer nurses. And it also means that we're going to turn our country into a client state where those who can afford to opt out of the public sector strata, which many people have, sending our children to Model C schools with medical aid, bearing in mind and ignoring that a vast majority of African people in this country do not and will never have access any opt-out clauses. So we should be very careful with that. And I would be mindful that we don't feel that the wage bill is some kind of a waste by default.
I love speaking to you. Thank you, Lebohang. Thank you so much for talking to us this morning, just to give us a little bit of a touch on some of the key issues, because there are a lot more I know, but these were great to touch on. Lebohang Pheko is the Senior Research Fellow at the Trade Collective, speaking about the budget's priorities, and of course it's Dr. Pheko. So we'll leave it there for this morning. Police money and all. What was it? Cold drink money and all. That's got me laughing. Not to mention the Mabenas as well. We must never forget them.